too much feedback in there. Okay. You're listening to the Inland Empire's home for big country hits, AM 1240, KVIG. Okay, so let's take this from the top here. This is a novel set in 1973 in suburban western Pennsylvania. The main character is a high school jazz trombonist named Ed, and he is madly in love with a girl named Jeannie who plays piano and sings. In this scene, his father tells him that Ed's going to have to learn how to work on his car, how to maintain his car, because if he plans on being a musician for a living, he's going to have to know this to save some money here. So, hey, Paul? Thank you. So it's about 10 degrees outside, and but the father insists on keeping the garage door open for ventilation purposes as they're walking through both a tune-up and an upgrade to 12 volts from 6 volts. Just after noon, I heard a car horn in our driveway. It was Jeannie. "Hi," she called. "Thought I'd see what you're up to." "Surgery," I answered. "Upgrading the bug from 6 volts to 12 volts. "Really? What for?" "Because," Dad answered, smiling, "Ike isn't president anymore." Jeannie giggled. "Can I watch?" "You can help," I answered. "Here." I handed her a screwdriver and pointed to the left tail light. "Unscrew the red thing and we'll replace the bulb." Jeannie daintily unscrewed the red tail light cover. "Turn the bulb to the left and pull it out," I told her. She gingerly pulled the bulb out. I handed her a new one. She pushed it into place, turned it to the right, and replaced the red cover. Dad and I lifted the rear seat and pulled the old battery out. "Oh, hell," I muttered. "Look." The floor beneath the battery was rotted. Dad grimaced. Acid leaking. "Well, no problem. We'll run down to the junkyard next week and cut off a new section. Meantime, let's get the battery in." Dad hunted up a piece of plywood to cover the rotted floorboard. We hooked up the new battery and Dad fired up the engine. It seemed to run fine. He tested the wipers and turned on the lights. "Come here a second," I motioned to Jeannie and pointed to the left tail light. It glowed red. She grinned. "We'll call this the Gene Melconian Memorial Tail Light," I teased. Dad climbed out. "Go ahead, fire up the radio." I slid into the driver's seat and turned on the radio. I heard AM static, a good sign. The radio worked. I punched it over to FM and dialed up 90.5 WDUQ, the jazz station. We soon heard the sound of a jazz piano through the speaker. "Good radio," I smiled. "Well," Dad sighed, "anyone feel like lunch?" "Sure." Thank God, I thought. My feet were frozen. I turned to Jeannie. "Like to join us?" "Just sloppy joes. Mrs. Kazava makes a mean sloppy joe mix." The three of us chatted all through lunch. At one point, Jeannie asked, "Do you have any old clothes you've outgrown?" "I'm thinking, Christmas is coming up. We should do something for Davy. All of us, everyone in the band." "I'll check," I answered. "But you're right. I was thinking the same thing. We should take turns having him over for dinner. I remember the way he ate the day after Thanksgiving." "Maybe we should invite both him and his mom," Jeannie said. Dad and I exchanged glances. I remembered what Aunt Nancy told me. "Well, maybe," I replied, "but his mom is, well, she has some problems. The fact is, she doesn't smell very good. It might be embarrassing for Davy." Jeannie thought for a moment. "Well, let's include some canned food with the clothes." "My clothes might not fit him very well." "No problem. Remember how Elaine made my gown? She said she'd help with any clothes that are too big." Dad smiled at Jeannie. "Sounds like you have it all planned out." Jeannie smiled back. "I've been thinking about it a lot. Elaine does hair too. Maybe I could get her to cut Davy's hair. His haircut is awful." "Well, that may be tricky too," I told her. "Davy's mom cuts his hair. She might be insulted if someone else does it." The three of us were quiet for a moment. Then Dad spoke. "Tell his mom Elaine needs practice cutting men's hair. Make it sound like she's doing Elaine a favor, rather than the other way around." Jeannie's face lit up. "That's a great idea. God, I can't wait to tell Elaine. Matter of fact, I think I'll run by her place now." She stood and smiled affectionately at the two of us. "I'll let you two guys get back to your manly work." I walked her out to her car. It was bitterly cold, about 10 degrees, and the wind was kicking up. Thanks for your help, I told her. Next time I have to change a light bulb, I'm calling you. She laughed. It was fun. And thanks for caring about Davy. I'll see what I can do. We hugged and kissed. Oh, Eddie, she murmured. I love you. I love you too. See you tomorrow. I waved goodbye as she left. Then, before heading back to the garage, I went up to my room and rolled on an extra pair of heavy winter socks. Okay. After lunch, Dad walked me through the tune-up of the VW's engine. First, we changed the oil. While it drained, he showed me how to install the points and how to adjust them with a knife-like feeler gauge. Then the new condenser went in. I got flat on my back on the ice-cold concrete floor of the garage and learned how to adjust the valves with the feeler gauge. It took several attempts for me to get it right. Every time, Dad would check and say, too loose or too tight. The concrete floor was sucking all the warmth out of my back and legs. Finally, Dad nodded approval. I stood back up on my frozen feet and we filled the crankcase with fresh oil. Dad fired up the engine and I learned how to adjust the carburetor and the distributor timing. And I had to admit, it was fun. The engine ran perfectly. I replaced the parts and adjusted everything and the engine ran. Sure, Dad talked me through it, but still, listening to the engine humming happily, all those different engine parts making music, I couldn't help but feel good. Before, I thought of an engine as just one component of the car. Now I knew it was many parts, all of which now sang in perfect harmony. I almost forgot the cold. Almost, but not quite. 5 hours later, I stepped into the hot shower. My frozen feet almost split apart when the hot water hit them. I let the hot spray drench my back and legs. It had been a long, achingly cold afternoon. I wondered how Dad could stand it. The freezing cold didn't seem to bother him a bit. Maybe it was some tough Scots gene that gave him his foot-thick hide. Obviously, this is one more example of me taking after my mom's side of the family. I was a typical comfort-loving Irishman. And I kept hearing, "Oh, Eddie, I love you." I replayed the moment again and again. The two of us hugging in the cold and Jeannie saying, "Eddie, I love you." A half hour later, I was back out in the shed practicing trombone. After an hour, I switched to piano. I was working on some pretty advanced stuff on trombone, but on piano, I was going back to kindergarten. I worked on the scales and my hands slipped off the keys and I felt humiliated. I thought back to when I started playing trombone. It was years before I managed to sound acceptable, let alone good. I wondered if it would take that long to sound good on piano. Probably. You have some dues to pay, I thought. "Oh, Eddie, I love you." The moment kept intruding. After a time, I gave up and just relived it again and again. "Oh, Eddie, I love you." I put my hands on the keyboard and tried to find the sound of Jeannie's lovely voice. "Oh, Eddie," and let's keep it simple, key of C, E, D, E. I love you. I fiddled with the melody and the harmony for about an hour. Then I found myself yawning and realized it was getting late. Time for bed. This has been a good day, I thought. I tuned up the VW, upgraded it to 12 volts, and started working on a song. What do I call it? Well, I wrote the song on a Sunday. Let's call it Sunday Evening. I opened the door to the shed. About a foot of new snow had fallen. I crunched my way back through the fresh snow back to the